No, my question, I was thinking, you know how Rush Limbaugh on his show a lot of times has people who come on and they thank him for kind of changing their mind on things and kind of waking up from being a former liberal. I was just wondering if that kind of experience has happened to you, and could you give an example?
Oh, yes. Yes, and in fact, I go back to my college speeches. There's a reason it's worth risking having food thrown at you and physical assault by showing up on a, well, it's fun. But in addition to that, no, I have turned many of those same protesters, if I can just, actually one of them I met recently at a radio station in Los Angeles, and he had a big stack of my books, and he told me he was my biggest fan, which was so great because I was dying to meet my biggest fan. And he said he first heard of me when I don't know, it was at Berkeley or UCLA or something, and he said he was standing outside my speech with a bullhorn denouncing me. and then, I don't think he ever made it into the speech, but he did at some point end up in a bookstore, and he saw some books by me, and he said, let me see what this evil woman has to say. And he said he started flipping through one of the books and said, yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. And he just started reading all of my books, and now he's my biggest fan. And another one that I won't waste your time on a lot of these, but I thought this was funny because it was at Syracuse University, and I usually go out to dinner with the college Republicans afterwards, and one of the kids, he kept telling me what was happening at the Green meetings, and it was all this crazy stuff. But it was just, and then they did this, and then they did that. And I said, what, are you like a secret mole at the Greens? And he said, oh, no, I used to be a member. And so I asked him what changed him, and he said, well, you spoke here 4 years ago, and you were the only one I heard making any sense on terrorism. So I signed up with the College of Republicans. Oh, sorry, just one more. Because this is totally hilarious. It was earlier this year in Arizona, and a kid got up, young, sweet Mexican kid, and he said, you know, my family brought me here illegally. I'm an illegal alien. I think he went to college there. So what do you say to me, or something like that? And, well, first of all, I alerted the authorities. Arrest him. And then I told him, look, I'm sure you're a lovely person, but you were a country, not a department store. We ought to be choosing our future immigrants on the basis of something other than lives within walking distance. You know, I like Europeans, too. They're not allowed to immigrate here. Anyway, I told him everything I thought, and I'm right about, on immigration. And the kids told me at dinner that night that he walked out and signed up with the College Republicans.
Hi, Ann. We all know the immediate goal is to make Obama a one-term president.
Yes.
Now, in all your travels, have you run across a group, the Hoover Institute,
sure,
anybody who is coming up with a 100-year plan for the United States of America? And
wow,
to take back the country.
Ahead. You should be you're like our version of the Stalinists. They only had 5-year plans. Look, all I care about is this November. Politics is a process. I recently went to a Romney fundraiser and tracked him down so I could tell him, you owe me. And you better be as right-wing a president as I'm telling everyone you're going to be. And while I had his ear, I suggested that he take Chris Christie as his vice presidential nominee. I mean, I do think Christie really has the fire in his belly. What I guess we seem to think is lacking with Romney, but I think in retrospect, looking at, and as many of you probably know, I was parachuting into the governor's mansion in New Hampshire trying to get him to run. In retrospect, I actually think Romney is probably a better candidate this year because it's going to be so tough to beat an independent or an incumbent. We need those independents, and there is nothing scary about Mitt Romney. I mean, everything I love about Chris Christie is not necessarily your vote getter with the women. With the independents, with many of them it is, and the enthusiasm is contagious and so on and so forth. But I'm seeing it as, 8 years with Romney and then Chris Christie for the cleanup guy. You're right here.
I think I heard you say you like Romney. Who do you think is the most viable vice presidential candidate to really help him, and why? And could he or she help another Republican candidate?
Second question first. One of the things I like about Romney is he has teams of analysts working on this. Who will help him the most? And what do we need? And how does this person pull? My hope is Chris Christie. My prediction is Marco Rubio. You get Hispanics, you get Tea Partiers, you get Florida. There are also downsides, and I'm sure Romney's going through all that. But I don't think, he'll pick somebody crazy. Would another vice presidential nominee help one of the other two? I don't think so. I think Newt Gingrich would lose in a 49-state landslide and take the Senate with him. I mean, that is really Armageddon. And Santorum I like, and I happen to agree with on most of the issues. He frustrates me because even when I agree with him, he's not making the point properly. And I've seen him do this 3 times on 3 important issues on TV, although he has been better in the debates. But on TV, the first time was when Chris Wallace, one of the many liberals at Fox News, said to him, they're arguing about women in the military. And Chris Wallace said to him, so would you agree with this quote? And it was something along the lines of, the most important issue is military cohesion, or, unit cohesiveness. And I'm still yelling at the TV, Hitler probably said it, don't answer that question. I mean, certainly any lawyer knows, don't ask a question you don't know the answer to. Don't answer a question when you don't know who said that quote. No, he blunders right into that one. But even having blundered into it, it was in fact someone who 40 years ago opposed, or whatever, 50 years ago opposed blacks in the military. He just shrugged his shoulders. Well, no, okay, you fell into it, but now you have to come back and say, well, what are you saying, Chris Wallace? We should be against cohesiveness in the military? Is that what your point is? I mean, Hitler had soup. Does that mean we can't have soup? So he completely blew that. I then saw him describing the contraception thing on O'Reilly, and I know lawyers who were watching that show and they did not understand what he was saying. And it's a very simple point. It's about the Constitution of the United States. Our Constitution limits what the federal government can do. It says almost nothing about what the states can do. There are about 4 things the Constitution says states can't do. You can't ban arms, you can't trample on religious freedom or free speech, you can't run somebody for president who's under 35 years old. There isn't much the states can't do. If a state wants to pass a law saying everybody has to wear a purple hat, they could do it. Okay, do you understand the contraception thing now? No, there is no constitutional prohibition on a state banning contraception. That's simply a fact about our federalist system of government. He never used the word constitutional. He just kept talking about, does a state have the right to? And the entire interview sounded like he was talking about whether it was a good idea. And then the latest one was this weekend, on This Week, where he was given a quote from his own book. And it was a perfectly respectable quote. It was something about how radical feminists have harmed the family and made it more difficult for women to stay home and raise children rather than having a career. They flashed this quote up, and do you want to explain that? And he said, oh, my wife wrote that chapter. Well, her name isn't on the book. She's not in the acknowledgments. And then he said, yeah, he's looking at the quote. That's a new quote for me. It's your book! No, he can't be the nominee. No, stop this. I love him. He should run for governor or something. He can't be the nominee. We've got to beat Barack.
The last couple of general elections, foreign policy has been front and center. Not so much now with what's happening in Iran, Israel. How do you think this may impact the election this time?
I'm glad you asked. I keep meaning to write a column about this, and I will before it happens. I mean, others have said this, but I was going to say it first, but something came up. I think Obama's going to have an October surprise, because the one advantage, well, there are many advantages, but among the advantages an incumbent president has is he's the only one who has commander-in-chief experience. You can't get that as a governor. You can't get it as a senator. You just can't. And so to switch the focus in October, I mean, he may not be able to hold off this Iran thing now. I was thinking what he'd do is, send more ships into the Straits of Hormuz, maybe with Biden on it, so he could kill 2 birds with 1 stone, get that ship bombed. And then he could take Hillary as his vice president. I think there will be some sort of dramatic foreign policy confrontation in October, shortly before the election, to take people's minds off the fact that they don't have jobs and think, oh, I'm so nervous, and Obama, he got bin Laden. Do not be fooled by it, right-wingers.
Hi, Ann. I've heard you talk about financial regulation in somewhat essentialist terms, where deregulated markets are good, regulated markets are bad. But I wanted to ask you a more specific question. To get over the much more severe economic trauma we had in the 30s, we passed Glass-Steagall, which separated commercial and investment banking. And many economists agree that the repeal of that contributed to our most recent economic meltdown. I was wondering, would you support reinstituting some type of policy that would separate those to
I
limit
know there's an answer to this question, but I do not know what it is. I've decided there are other people covering that. There are a few issues. You know, I cover the French Revolution for you. I got Joe McCarthy. I got Darwinism. Glass-Steagall is being covered by others. There are a few others. I mean, I know a little about global warming, but really I'd go to Chris Horner's, what is it, it's Red Hot Lies, I think. I figure there are other people who are concentrating on global warming, other people on Glass-Steagall, but I know there's an answer to that.
Thanks for coming, Ann. But I have one, I'd like to answer two questions. One, I think we all agree that Obamacare is bad. And that's my biggest problem with Romney is Romneycare. And Romney, if he would have ever come out and said, I screwed up, but he's never done that, and he says that he'll repeal Obamacare and he knows what to replace it with. And he says Romneycare was good. So that scares the hell out of me and I think a lot of other people.
I'm glad you asked that.
Plus the fact that we need independents to vote somebody in. And with Obama bringing up the hate and discontempt against anybody that's successful, it just seems like Romney is losing in that account too. So.
Well, I'm glad you asked about Romneycare. I wrote about it about 2 weeks ago, and more to come, but I must tell you, you have to read that column. And see, I don't know about Glass-Steagall, but I know about Romneycare. The problem with health care comes from the federal government. It doesn't come from the states, and a lot of those mandates are on the states. A governor only has so much maneuvering room. States, for example, are already required to cover the uninsured. And we have socialist health care. It's called an emergency room. And Massachusetts at that time was spending $1 billion a year paying for the medical care for the uninsured. The two pillars of Romneycare, no frills health insurance, and instead of spending $1 billion on medical care through our emergency rooms, we're just going to require everyone to get health insurance, and for the allegedly very poor who can't even afford that, we'll give them little subsidies. It's actually a fantastic plan, and other states should have followed it. And there's nothing unconstitutional about a state. As I was just saying, a state could require you to, they could ban purple hats, it could mandate purple hats. A state could do anything. We count on the people in those states and in those towns to vote properly. That is the most freedom promoting system men have ever created. It's given to us by our Constitution, and liberals ignore it, but we don't ignore it. States have total powers, municipalities total power, but you can move and you can vote for different people. In any event, if other states had followed what Romney did, the reason Romneycare was wrecked, and sorry to finish off the last point, an individual mandate from the state level, there's nothing unconstitutional about that. You have all kinds of mandates from the state, and to take it back to the beginning of the Constitution seems to assume that states will mandate that men of militia age be armed. States can mandate stuff. It's the federal government, but that's just the legal hook to say that Obamacare is unconstitutional. The real problem with Obamacare is Kathleen Sebelius and HHS. And as I said in my column this week, it ought to be called the Kathleen Sebelius Dream Act. It's whatever she thinks of, and next year she's going to ban guns. Your insurance premiums will go up if you have a gun at home. I mean, if contraception is something that has to be mandated by every insurance plan in the country, she can mandate anything, she can deprive us of anything. This was just the legal argument. But if the two pillars of Romneycare, no frills health insurance and a mandate to purchase health insurance, including the no frills, which the state was going to create a group rate for, if that had been followed in the other 49 states, we never would have had a problem with health care. Well, we would have had a little problem still from Congress and Medicare and Medicaid. What happened to Romneycare was that liberals twisted it and ruined it. Instead of the individual mandate with a subsidy for the poor, it just became a subsidy for the middle class. The subsidy kicks in if you're making like 3 times the poverty rate. So that just became welfare for all. That was the problem with the mandate in Romneycare. The problem with the no frills was that lasted about 6 seconds. And then the Massachusetts liberal bureaucracy started piling on mandates, the exact same problem that created the problem to begin with. But you wouldn't have had those liberals to do that in Mississippi, in Alabama, in Utah, maybe not even in Colorado, especially with you guys at the helm. But the basic idea of it was very conservative. And speaking of which, I mentioned that I was looking up how Reagan ran against Carter, and I was just reading his debate with Carter, one debate. And in that debate, Carter attacked him for not supporting the Equal Rights Amendment. And he said, no, I don't. I mean, that's constitutional is even bigger than a federal law. He said, because it'll take it out of the hands of state legislators, put it in the hands of unelected judges. But as governor of California, I signed 14 gender discrimination laws, 14 equal rights laws. It's an exact parallel. If the states had dealt with it, we never would have, well, there's only so much a state can do. We wouldn't have had the problem. And you have, I mean, that's our framers' genius. You have experimentation among 50 different states. You can see which states it works in and which states it doesn't work in. And you can say, hey, why can't we be like this state? New Hampshire spends the least on education in the country, and they have the highest SAT scores. Well, you can't do that if it's federal. You can make those comparisons if it's statewide, but the two basic pillars of Romneycare, no frills, bare bones health insurance being offered, which basically no state does now, and an individual mandate, since the states have to pay for the uninsured anyway, those are actually really great plans. And it was liberals who wrecked it.
Hi, yes, I'm reading the book by Jason Matera, and he was one of our speakers at one of the conferences.
Yes.
Yeah, you know the guy that, talked to Biden, and then Biden said, all the murderers are going to be, and the rapists and stuff, because he asked him a question about it. Well, in the book, he talks about one of the Hillary campaigns or something, and how Obama's campaign then texted everybody in the audience with free Dave Matthews tickets. And the whole social media thing. And this chapter is scaring me to death because I don't see anybody on the right doing anything with current social media or anything remotely in touch with this century on the right. We're just...
Well, first of all, we are mostly taking questions tonight on Ann Coulter books. And to go back to the last question.
I'm sorry, I meant to screen that one. Sorry.
And just one final point on Romneycare. And you know who supported the federal individual mandate up until 6 months ago? And that isn't an Ann Coulter exaggeration. Newt Gingrich. He supported the unconstitutional individual mandate, i.e. the federal mandate, which Congress does not have the authority that the states have. Newt Gingrich supported that. Social media. Well, I'm on Twitter. It's always going to be hard with young people, which is why I say we've got to raise the voting age. Because they've just been put through, 14 years of re-education camp, 6 hours a day of Barack Hussein Obama. And they're college professors. It's like, this is why I have such contempt for these protesters at my college speeches, that they have the audacity to pretend they're the rebels. They're polishing their professors' apples. Oh, look at me, I'm protesting Ann Coulter. Yeah, go do it at Liberty University and I'll be impressed.
Hi, Ms. Coulter. As an 18-year-old registered independent voter, I have a question for you related to job recovery and creation in the United States. As I see it, that's one of the main issues facing us in the upcoming years, and the impact globalization and outsourcing is having on job creation. My question to you as an advocate of free market capitalism is, how do we reconcile these two things?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. And by the way, there's one for your social media question. We got an 18-year-old right there. Probably follows me on Twitter. I think you reconcile it by making it easier to hire an American. I mean, Democrats, particularly Teddy Kennedy, for decades now have been saying, here, I'm going to help you, American employees. I'm going to give you all this stuff that your employers have to do for you. And you got the Family Leave Act, and we're going to raise the minimum wage, and we're going to give you extra time to take off. And oh, also, all these trial lawyers can sue your employer if you get fired for some reason. They have raised the cost in stupid ways of hiring an American, and at some points, American employers just said, okay, I don't have to worry about John Edwards suing me. I'm going to build it in Mexico. Or China. I mean, it's expensive to ship stuff here from China. People love to have a Made in America stamped on their products. But you have endless regulators. But have you seen this guy, there are two co-founders of Home Depot, and he's a very wealthy man, very successful business. He said, when I started Home Depot, I filled out these 6 pages. I couldn't do it today. It's 300 pages. We couldn't start Home Depot today. And it's an important question, because I think a lot of people are fighting the last war in a lot of different ways. There's a little preview of an upcoming column I'm thinking about. And one way is, like I say, this weird obsession with denouncing Mitt Romney as the moderate, when we ought to be popping champagne corks and dancing. We've triumphed over the Rockefeller Republicans. There are no liberal Republicans running this year. There are no liberal Republicans. In 2008, we had one guy who was pro-choice, one who opposed Clinton's impeachment, one who opposed the Bush tax cuts, wanted to shut down Guantanamo, called waterboarding torture, supported amnesty for illegals, and that was the one we ran. This year, they're all pro-life. They're all swearing up and down they're going to repeal Obamacare. Mitt Romney has the great line about my first day in office, I'm going to issue 50-state waivers to Obamacare. This year, they're all March Hare right-wingers. We've won! But instead, there's this search for the establishment just pushing this guy down our throat. It just doesn't comport with the facts. And one of the other last wars being fought now, I think, is on taxes. When Reagan came in, the highest tax rate was, what, 70, 80%? I can't even imagine a world where the top tax rate is 70%. But I think we got all the low-hanging fruit on taxes now. I mean, even Obama won't raise taxes. The problem now is not taxes. It's harder to talk about. The problem now is regulation. It's these endless bureaucracies in Washington, at the state level, at the municipal level. Just endless bureaucracy. What you have to go through in New York to change the awning in front of your store. And the Home Depot guy. And I have an idea for Mitt Romney, and he should run a whole series of 30-second ads of just the forms that need to be filled out to do this or that business. Just the stacks of forms and bureaucrats and steps, like a Milton Friedman presentation, 30 seconds. You could do 100 of those. But now the problem is regulation, it isn't taxes, and regulation has a lot to do with businesses sending their manufacturing abroad. It isn't just the slave labor over there. Come on, aren't there any more Newton Santorum supporters? Unless you are all voting for Mitt Romney, I want those people to speak now or forever hold your peace.
Hi, Ann. This is Ray, City of Craig. First of all, thanks for being with us tonight. I appreciate it. And the other, as I alluded to earlier when we talked this evening, next time you have an opportunity to visit O'Reilly on the O'Reilly show, make sure that he doesn't get the last word.
I try not to let him have any words.
But my question is that you already talked about some of the things that you think are important for the 2012 elections. One being repealing Obamacare and regulations, which we know we've got way too many of those. And it doesn't matter which industry it's in, whether it be local business or free enterprise as we know it today. And we also believe that, let free enterprise do what it's done for the last 100 years. It's worked, and let's let it do what it's it's always done. But what, in your opinion, is the 5 most important issues going into the 2012 elections that we need to face or deal with?
Oh, 5 is way too many.
Yeah.
I think we get 2 in a presidential election. And I hope it will remain the economy and joblessness and the enormous bureaucracies. And that's why I like a turnaround guy, a guy who hasn't spent his life in Washington. I mean, as much as I agree with Santorum on the social issues, he is kind of a big government conservative. He did vote for No Child Left Behind and all of this government funding, and he wants child tuition, you know, being paid for homeschoolers or something. No, run for governor then. I gotta say, on domestic policy, I'm with Ron Paul. Congress doesn't have the constitutional authority to do 90% of what they're doing. And that would be the real objection to Obamacare if we hadn't already accepted Social Security and Medicare. But oh, apparently we're pretending those are constitutional, so we have to go after Obamacare on this one new aspect, the individual mandate. But oh man, this contraception mandate, you are dealing with a lunatic doctrinaire feminist who does not want to compromise, who does not care what anyone thinks. And I mean, as a lawyer, what has driven law students crazy for 30 years is, well, you can't understand a just spread an opinion because it makes no sense. What liberals figured out was, even though they're, one of my favorite words, co-equal branches of government, because what's the difference in equal? Co-equal. Anyway, co-equal branches of government, technically the Supreme Court, they are not technically our dictators. And yet, liberals figured out, 40, 50 years ago, they get the last word. So, if we can just get, you know, lying, deceptive, principleless, no honor liberals on the Supreme Court and get 5 votes for them, we win everything we can't get Americans to vote for. We can't get Americans to vote for abortion. Let's just have them say, oh, we see it here in the penumbras and emanations. If there were equivalent right-wing activism on the Supreme Court, they would be looking in the penumbras and emanations and finding a constitutional right to a flat tax, and a very low one. You would have a constitutional right to bear nuclear arms. But we don't, and there would definitely be a right for free champagne for blondes. It's in the penumbras.
Oh, yeah.
I know it's there. Okay, now insurance has taken the place of the fig leaf of constitutional. They used to just say whatever they want, the wish list of the ACLU, it's right there in the Constitution. Where? I don't see it. It must be in the invisible ink portion. Now it's going to be, this is required by insurance. They can make us do whatever they want. Forget contraception. They're trying to turn this into some sort of religious issue. It isn't. It's a freedom issue. They are going to take your guns away. You're going to have to pay more money in insurance premiums for if you have a gun. That'll be another one. Of course, we're going to have to cover abortion. I assume that goes without saying. We'll have to recycle. Probably go vegan. But, I mean, anything can be called insurance if contraception can be called insurance. It's their wish list, and you don't even have to get 5 justices to vote for it. It's just this one unelected secretary of HHS. It's really terrifying what's happening.
Sherry, have you identified as Santorum supporter?
Hi, Ann. First, I'm not a Republican. I'm a conservative, and my beliefs more closely align, I think, with libertarians. But I don't really know what the difference is.
So you're torn between Santorum and Ron Paul.
I kind of like Ron Paul. But,
me too.
I have a couple of concerns. And recently I'd seen that Chuck Norris wrote in his column, he quoted, I'm having a Rick Perry moment.
I've heard about this, I haven't seen it. The theory was it was written by Newt Gingrich and not an actor in Hollywood because it apparently went through all of Rick Santorum's big government votes, right?
Yeah, something like that. And there were 2 things. One is, I don't know why I'm having a Rick Perry moment here.
Commerce Department. That was what Rick Perry couldn't remember.
I had read that, that Romney has been associated with the Bilderberg group, and that was a big concern of mine. And so
I'll do Bilderberg and tell you why you can't vote for Ron Paul, although I love him and he would be my second choice. I actually have a friend who went to join the Bilderberg. There's just a bunch of useless old men. He thought it would be fun. And trilateral. And it's just a bunch of useless old men. It's like Henry Kissinger. They don't run anything. No, the media runs everything. Soros runs a lot. The unions run a lot. But Bilderberg, it's, you know.
Chuck Norris cited that Soros commented that there was no difference between Romney and Obama. That was what...
Yes, but we're Republicans. We use our own brains. And I think Soros, very much like the rest of Obama supporters, don't want the nominee to be Romney. I mean, it seems sometimes they can't help themselves. They are so loving this contraception thing, so they can scare pee-in-their-pants soccer moms. He's going to take our contraception away. But other than that, they're clearly constantly building up Santorum, then building up Newt, Soros. I wouldn't believe anything he said, and I wouldn't take that statement at face value. I think he wants to harm Romney. And you can't vote for Ron Paul. Are there any Ron Paul supporters, or am I wasting my breath? Okay, I love Ron Paul, and I will encourage Mitt Romney, who does owe me, to put him in charge of domestic policy. But there are some things you just can't get elected if you say you can get elected in Texas, you can get elected in a congressional office. I mean, Medicare and Social Security, for example, and Mitt Romney, in one of the debates, one of the recent debates, I think it was 3 back, he had the most beautiful answer on Medicare and Social Security. It was basically the Ryan plan, which I agree with you, I think is pretty weak-kneed. But look at how they attacked Ryan for that. It doesn't even kick in for 15 years, and they have him pushing old ladies off the cliff in wheelchairs. If even that, we're not even going to touch Social Security for the next 15 years of retirees, I don't know why I'm supposed to cheer about that. But if even that makes you virtually unelectable, it has to be sugar-coated, it has to be done slowly, it has to be done in a transition, or you can be a purist and we'll all be in the same re-education camp together someday. But Mitt Romney had a really beautiful answer where he talked about means testing Social Security and Medicare, which is good because it starts to get it to be a welfare program. And the more it's a welfare program and the less that it is general middle class welfare, the more likely we are to get rid of it. He threw in raising the retirement age, but he said it in such a gentle way. I tweeted at that moment, every Republican should memorize what and how Mitt Romney just talked about what he's going to do with Social Security and Medicare. Yes, he's going to tackle it, but you can't talk like Ron Paul and get elected president, though I will work on making him domestic policy advisor.
All right, one last question. Is our last question for the evening?
Ann, thank you very much for coming. You talked about Chris Christie as a VP potential. You talked about Marco Rubio. How about Alan West?
I love Alan West. I think he is the greatest living human being. But I think a congressman isn't good for vice president for the same reason I think a congressman isn't good for president. We need every advantage we can get. And by the way, I think Alan West should probably run for governor or for Senate. He wants to, I don't know who knows what's going to happen to his House seat, be Speaker of the House maybe. But I think we kind of want to save him to run him for president someday, because he is a stunning, stunning human being. But Congress, the reason you want a governor as a senator is you want someone who has a proven ability to attract the votes of independents, moderates, women. And so preferably not a Republican from a state like Arizona. Just to take one completely random example off the top of my head. But like a state like Massachusetts or New Jersey. I mean, if you're a Republican elected in one of these heinous states, you can get votes. And also, I mean, I think this probably comes a little bit from my legal background, because I've noticed a lot of lawyers are much more much more attracted to the right-wingers from blue states. Look at the Supreme Court. Scalia from Chicago, Thomas from DC, Alito from New Jersey. Oh, and then O'Connor, who sucked, from Arizona. Kennedy sucks from Northern California. No, we don't like getting our justices from nice, lovely, patriotic red states. We want them from the Soviet Union.
Rick.
I want to ask you the same question that people in this room always ask me, which is, I mean, these folks are activists.
Bless you.
As Grace Marie Turner, who's spoken at our conferences twice, has said, these are the people the founders knew would arrive to save the country. Mm-hmm. They always ask me, what is it we need to do? So I want you to tell them, what is it we need them to do? Because let me tell you, they'll do it.
Excellent. We have a band of activists. Make sure everyone you know votes for Mitt Romney. This is no time for fooling around, right-wingers. I've had it with these primaries. But no, I mean, the activism of people like you really does change the world, and the most stunning example of that is on amnesty for illegals. You had the Republican president of the United States, the entire Democratic Party, the candidate we were about to run for president on the Republican ticket, all supporting amnesty. Oh, and the entire media, not just the non-Fox media. Oh, the Fox media too, and the Wall Street Journal, dying for amnesty for illegals. But the people didn't want it. And just by calling and writing and making their views known, oh, now Republicans can't run away from it fast enough, which, by the way, another problem with Newt and Santorum, both for amnesty, though they won't use the word. No Republican will use the word amnesty now. It's like Democrats with abortion. They won't use the word, but that's what they're for. And when Newt Gingrich is talking about, you know, the red card for illegals, it's totally different. See, it's red, it's not green. The reason Republicans all secretly in their little hearts want to give amnesty to illegals is not because they love Hispanics, it's because they love big business, and big business wants cheap labor. That's what Rick Perry was doing. He was sucking up to big business the same way he was when he mandated that vaccine for teenage girls in Texas. He was sucking up to a big corporation. That's why he has in-state tuition for illegal aliens. Because if you need your cabbage picked, I always tell people if they don't know what their position is on illegal immigration, ask yourself, do I have a nanny? Do I have a pool boy? Do I have a chauffeur? Because if you don't, illegal immigration doesn't help you. In fact, you are subsidizing other people's pool boys, nannies, you know, so they can pay, and cabbage pickers, so they can pay them below the minimum wage, and we subsidize them by paying for their health care, their housing, their food. All these education, all these Republicans are champing at the bit to give amnesty to illegals, not Mitt Romney. He worked he had an agreement with the federal INS so that his state troopers could stop illegal aliens, a la Arizona. He had an English immersion program for recent immigrants. He stopped in-state tuition for illegals. He stopped a driver's license for illegals. And he supports E-Verify. Santorum's voted against E-Verify, which is the only successful federal program in the history of the universe. It's set up through Homeland Security. When you hire someone, you go onto the Homeland Security website, and within 2 minutes, you can determine whether it's a legitimate Social Security card, and it's an American citizen. And it's accurate more than 99% of the time. If it comes back with a false negative, the person isn't fired, they get a chance to appeal. And who voted against it in the United States Senate? Rick Santorum. Where did this come from that Mitt is not the most liberal? He's the most conservative. He's just a little bit of a dork.
And thank you. You are remarkable and everything we could have hoped for. I think Jennifer's got some closing remarks, but I would like you all to join me in a warm Steamboat thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll see you next year.
credit card? Cash, so which one you want? You are $63. Put one of these in there for you.